What if I told you that the secret to better sleep isn't just about shutting your eyes, but about unlocking something deeper, a sense of inner safety that allows your mind, body, and soul to truly rest? And what if your struggles with sleep could be the very gateway to greater joy, resilience, and self-discovery? Welcome back to Pleasure in the Pause, a podcast dedicated to empowering midlife women to connect with their bodies, pleasure and power, and perimenopause, menopause, and beyond. I am your host, Gabriella Espinosa, women's health and sexual wellness coach, and it is my pleasure to be here with you. Today, we're diving into a topic that touches every single one of us: sleep. For over 30 years, my guest today, Dr. Nerina Ramlakhan, has been revolutionizing the way we think about rest. She's not just a sleep expert, she's a physiologist, author, and speaker whose work blends the science of sleep with the soulful wisdom needed to restore energy and joy in an increasingly fast-paced world. But what makes her approach so extraordinary is her ability to see sleep as more than just physical rest. It's an act of self-care, resilience, and dare I say, rebellion in a society that glorifies burnout. In today's episode, Dr. Ramlakhan will share her incredible journey from personal challenges like PTSD and burnout to becoming one of the UK's leading sleep experts. We'll uncover the surprising truths about how our nervous system impacts rest, explore why so many of us feel guilt around slowing down, and learn practical strategies to invite true restoration into our lives. So before we dive in, let me ask you this. When was the last time you gave yourself permission to rest deeply, without guilt, without trying to be productive, without doing anything? If the answer feels out of reach, this episode is for you. Join me in welcoming Dr. Nerina Ramlakhan to the show. Welcome, Dr. Nerina.
Thank you, Gabriella. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I am so looking forward to this much needed conversation. For the last 30 years, your work has focused on helping people restore their energy and joy through better sleep. You've impacted thousands of people through your public speaking, the books you've authored, the numerous talks you give to organizations. Can you share with our listeners what inspired you to focus on sleep and how your own lived experiences influenced your approach?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And of course, it's my lived experience because as a baby, I couldn't sleep. And that continued. In fact, my mother, would say, "You were so restless. You're so restless." So I grew up hearing that. And this continued through my teens, into my 20s, got to my 30s, and I got really ill. But underlying the sleep issues, that was just the kind of the symptom of everything that was going on, and the turmoil that was my life, It wasn't an easy childhood, and there was a lot of ancestral trauma, a lot of trauma in my upbringing, in my childhood. Although, bless my parents, I actually believe they did their best, but it wasn't an easy childhood. And this resulted in an inability to let go of the day and sleep. And I didn't even realize I had a problem until I became very sick when I was 31. And I actually ended up in a psychiatric unit. It was from there that I realized that the way I'd been living my life and the way I'd been perceiving life was completely upside down, inside out. I realized that I had a problem with sleep. I realized that what I thought was excitement was actually fear, and that not everyone lived like that. I was afraid of everything, but I was also high functioning and extremely driven. So I got to that point and I had done very well. I had my PhD, I had a great job working at Bupat. On the surface of it, I was married to someone who was very supportive, but on the surface of it, I looked great, but I was in turmoil. There were all sorts of very, very dodgy behaviors. There were eating disorders, and there was a chronic insomnia issue. And so magic happened, Gabriella, as a result of getting ill. Something happened. I was in and out of hospital for years, on and off medication. I was given a diagnosis, bipolar disorder, and 4 years of in and out of therapy and in and out of hospital. And I got to this point where something in me shifted. And I was doing a an MSc at Guy's Hospital at the time in psychiatry and psychology. And it must have been something that I was studying that shifted something in me. I don't think I've ever said it like that before, but looking back on it, I think that was a catalyst. And my subconscious told me, you can't live life like this anymore. And I walked out of marriage, therapy, my job, came off medication. I'm not recommending that people necessarily do it the way I did, but that's what I did. I went cold turkey. I went off to Australia and kind of really, what do you call it, free-falled, and had some kind of awakening experience. And something shifted in me. And this was 4 years after being hospitalized. And I started to see life in a different way. Everything fell into place. And I began this healing journey. And from there, I started almost as if by magic being given opportunities to work in organizations, to be on stages, to write books. And the biggest piece of magic and irony was being headhunted to work at the same clinic where I'd once been a patient. It was full circle, but this time to go back there and help people with severe mental health problems who weren't sleeping. And it was from there that I gained the confidence and the realization that I had a methodology that was unique. And I wrote my first book, Tired But Wired. And that's where it all kind of took off.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing your journey of healing, of generational trauma. I know many of those issues that you talked about are rooted in our ability to feel safe in our bodies, right? And I know that you talk about this idea of inner safety, which I think is so, so beautiful. Your philosophy emphasizes creating inner safety as a foundation for healing, as a foundation for deep rest. Could you explain what inner safety is and how it impacts the quality of our sleep and how we navigate the world, show up in the world, show up in our relationships?
Yeah, gosh, what a lovely question. I knew this would be a deep dive today. So I started connecting inner safety with the ability to sleep decades ago, but publishers weren't ready to talk about safety. And it was even in February 2020 when one of the top publishers approached me and said, what are you writing? I'd written 3 books by then. What are you writing? Do you want to write a book with us? And I said, I'm writing a book about feeling safe to sleep. And they said, no one will understand what that means, safety. That was in 2020. And I didn't go with them. Another publisher came along. But the funny thing was, after the conversation with that first publisher, 2 weeks after that, we went into the first lockdown in the UK. And suddenly everyone was running around feeling unsafe. So I went with another publisher, thank you, Wiley, and I wrote Finding Inner Safety, and that was published in 2022, Finding Inner Safety. But by then, suddenly, the whole world was talking about the nervous system and safety. It wasn't a conversation. And I'd been banging on about it for 25 years. You know, it's all about the nervous system because I'm a physiologist, and the physiology is what's going on in the body and the nervous system and the autonomic nervous system in relation to all the choices we make in life. So what I noticed, though, was that decades ago, if I'd be standing on a stage doing a keynote, I could be at a law firm or a management consultancy or whatever. If I used the sentence, we sleep when we feel safe, I noticed that the room would go really quiet and that many people would pick up a pen and they would write that down. Or they'd start typing it. Well, they weren't typing it into their phones then, but they would write it down. So I realized that this connection I was making was highly significant to people. We sleep when we feel safe. The ability to feel safe within you, and it brings up a lot of emotion for me because this has been my journey throughout my life, is to feel safe in myself, regardless of the external circumstances. And I realized that what I had touched back in 1999 as part of my awakening experience, for the first time in my conscious life, I had touched a place of inner safety in myself. And there was nothing happening around me in my external world. There was no one doing anything. I hadn't taken a drug. I wasn't smoking anything. I wasn't drinking. Well, I was drinking a latte. I was sitting in a bookshop in Brisbane. But as a result of, what I was doing at the time, looking back on it, was I was automatic journaling. I was automatic writing. And I didn't realize at the time that that's what I was doing. Because when I went to Australia, having gone off all my supports, ditched them all, come off my medication, and ditched my wonderful husband. He was a wonderful man, but he was supporting me and it was draining him. And the whole relationship was dysfunctional. Free falling, I felt desperate and I felt suicidal, not for the first time in my life. By then I'd already attempted suicide 3 times. But when I got to Australia, I felt so desperate. I started writing and something started to happen. Now you could use the words, and these words these days are quite fairly commonplace where people talk about automatic writing or channeling. But when I started writing, something started to come through. The words were coming out on the page that I didn't consciously think of. It was as if I was being spoken to. That was my first conscious experience of divine connection. I'd been brought up in a very strict Hindu family. We were brought up with a lot of Hindu rituals and puja, mantra practice, all of this. But I ditched it all because I thought, how is any of that useful to anyone when our family life is so chaotic and traumatizing and so hard? I don't believe in any of that. But then I got to this point and I discovered a personal connection with something that felt very somatic in my body. I felt so safe and it felt like everything made sense. I could understand why all the hardship had taken place. I could almost understand why everything had happened to my ancestors as slaves and my mother and father and their pain and the trauma they'd gone through that had brought me to this point. Everything started to make sense. I stopped blaming them. From then, I've been on this kind of journey since then of healing. Of course, I came back from Brisbane thinking I was enlightened and I wasn't. I then embarked on decades of just a shit show, really. More trauma. My sister dying very traumatically in 2002. My dad passing. My mother becoming very sick. Second marriage ending. There's just been a lot. But I always have this place of inner safety. And from this place, I have learned how to sleep. And every now and then something turns up in life, menopause, a relationship, where I then have to navigate a relationship. And all of a sudden, all the tools go out the window and I have to bring them. I hadn't been thinking about sleep and suddenly I'm sharing my bed with somebody. And I have to think, okay, my nervous system is really in a state of something at the moment, dysregulation, and I have to use my tools. I have to find safety in this dynamic of relationship. Well, see, when I went through menopause and perimenopause, I'm making up that I'm extremely old, but I'm not young. I've got some decades, and people weren't talking about menopause. They weren't talking about perimenopause. People weren't talking about grief when my sister. So all of this, I navigated very quietly. I didn't know I was going through perimenopause, but I just knew I was having these ferocious sweats. I was feeling old feelings of suicidal ideation came back. And I was working with so many people, I was working at a psychiatric clinic and I was feeling awful. But I didn't realize it was perimenopause and menopause. So I had to dig even deeper and find my strategies and tools and restore my sleep, keep restoring it.
Yes, so many women, especially as we're moving into that perimenopause phase, which can start in our mid-30s, right? And I think for you, it started in your mid-30s, right? When you had this upheaval, or was it before?
I think it started in my 40s. I think it started in my early 40s, but my sister had just died. Very suddenly, I fell pregnant and I had my daughter unexpectedly because I didn't think I could have children. So I had my daughter. I got married, but my marriage started crumbling. My father died. So there was just a lot. And my business was taking off. So there was all of that to navigate. And looking back on it, I pushed myself quite ferociously. I was running in my 30s anyway. Looking back on the awakening experience, basically what I did, I became very devoted to spiritual practice, but it almost became an addiction. And along with that, I became a very serious runner. So I was doing marathons, triathlons. I did my best marathons going through perimenopause. back then, no one was talking about low energy availability, the importance of eating nutrient-rich protein, fat, carbohydrate, hormone replacement therapy. So I was running my batteries down because I was so strong, so high functioning. But I really pushed myself hard in my 40s and into my 50s, really hard.
So it was that midlife period. And I hear stories from midlife women who struggle with this sense of feeling at home in their bodies, comfortable in their own skins, right? They feel this sense of overwhelm and anxiety, not only because of the hormonal disruption that's happening in our bodies, but also because it's a time of life that many of us are facing emotional and mental upheaval. There's grief. Kids are leaving the nest. Our relationships are changing. We have elderly parents to look after. Many of us are at a crossroads with our careers and unsure of what's next. And that lead to this idea of us just not feeling safe or at home. How can we move towards a place of greater safety? Feeling more at home in our bodies so that we can get the rest and the sleep we so deserve.
Well, even in Finding Inner Safety, the 4th book, I do write about my 5 non-negotiables. I call them my 5 non-negotiables, which sounds very harsh and dictatorial. But I have noticed that in my years of working with people, time and again, I've noticed there are 5 things that reset the nervous system. So the ability to feel safe is dependent upon where you live from in your nervous system. So if you look at the autonomic nervous system, which is divided into parasympathetic nervous system and sympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic is rest, repair, digestion, sexual function, the ability to feel pleasure, the ability to sleep, the ability to be within your skin and feel it. All of those good things you talk about in your work. The sympathetic nervous system is hypervigilant, fight or flight, survival mode. Parasympathetic is thriving. Sympathetic is surviving, adrenaline, cortisol, go, 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 can't stop, can't sleep, tipping into, immune system breaking down, getting sick. So the ability to sleep is about living from your parasympathetic. But our nervous system, if you think about the hunter-gatherer, was designed with these 2 clever branches of the nervous system in order to be able to navigate a world that was often unsafe as a hunter-gatherer, the caveman, cavewoman. So we needed that short, sharp burst of fight or flight energy from the sympathetic. But the problem with today's world is because of the way our world has become, we're living at the limits of our physiological capabilities, constantly stretched, constantly leaned in, constantly on our devices. Go, go, go. The mind in overdrive, living from the amygdala, the back, at the back of the brain, right in the reptilian brain, rather than from our executive functions that say, actually, the world's crazy. There is war. There is strife. There is financial chaos. People are dying. There's all this stuff happening. Yes. But here, right now, I am safe. But the reptilian brain doesn't know how to discern. So a lot of the people that I end up seeing, I worked with an investment bank last week, 250 people. And, many of them were asking the question, well, what's wrong with living in survival mode? Gosh, okay. Right. But to be able to sleep, we need to be in the parasympathetic. So there are 5 things which will reset your parasympathetic. We're talking surface methodology, quick wins. You do this for 10 to 14 days. Then we start to go deeper. So the 5 things are: eat breakfast within 30 to 45 minutes of rising, nutrient-rich breakfast, protein, fat, carbohydrate. Number 2, don't use caffeine as a substitute for food. Have your nutrient-rich breakfast, then you can have your lovely coffee. Number 3, make sure you're well hydrated. Aim to drink between 2 to 2.5 liters of water a day so that your brain, your biochemistry, your physiology, your sleep biochemistry functions optimally. Number 4, go to bed earlier, around 9:30, 10, and train your body, your mind, your spirit, your being to receive rest. as the precursor to sleep. So you don't have to be asleep at 9:30, but you are reading a book, you're resting, you're relaxing, you're practicing gratitude. You're doing something that decompresses the nervous system. Number 5, get your phone out of the bedroom. And then people say, well, I need to know the time. Get an old-fashioned digital clock in your room that doesn't tick, but don't look at it during the night. So these 5 things reset the nervous system. When people are doing them, I run a coaching program. It's a 6-week program called Be Your Own Sleep Coach. And tomorrow we're doing week 4. But for the first 3 weeks, my cohort have been practicing very diligently those 5 non-negotiables. And we have in that group, we have people who have gone through traumatic illness, cancer. We have ADHD in that group, severe mental health illness. We have people suffering from a traumatic loss of family. You have one person in the group whose sister is dying of cancer. But within 2 weeks, everyone's sleep is improving. Now we are going deeper. Now we're going into the deeper journey of learning how to let go, learning surrender, accepting rest, accepting pleasure even when life feels heartbreaking. And we are also going into the deeper work of being embodied, because Gabriella, right now, while I'm talking to you, my whole body is vibrating and my mind is thinking, do I say this? Do that? I can feel, but I'm really in touch with the fact that my feet are tingling. I was so disembodied before. The more I work on myself, the more I inhabit my body, even when I'm on the screen. I'm staying in my body because this is my investment towards how I'm going to sleep tonight, which will be in about 6 hours.
Mm-hmm.
The more I can be in my body now, the better I'll sleep tonight.
I love that you focus on rest and that bodily connection. I think as women, we are not taught to prioritize rest, pleasure, or play, right? To give ourselves the permission to relax and rest without guilt. Our worth is so tied to productivity. And that leads us to repeatedly override the signals of our body, this embodiment that you talk about. We spoke offline about the importance of embracing the feminine principle of allowing rest without guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Please, Dr. Nerina, why is this so essential? And how do we get to that place of shifting our mindset, releasing the guilt or shame, and really allowing ourselves to rest in pleasure?
This was a really hard one for me. And I work on it. I still work on it. It is in my nature. I mean, I'm a student of the gene keys. I don't know if you know much about the gene keys and human design, but in my whole holographic profile, I have restlessness and agitation. There's a lot of it in there, and unease. So the fact that it's sort of in my DNA, I have rituals. I have a red velvet chair in my living room. And I have a cat and a dog and a daughter who I share my living space with at the moment. Daughter's about to move out, but they all know that red chair is my red chair. It's beautiful. It's sumptuous. It was a gift to myself on a Valentine's Day a few years ago. But when I sit in this chair now, and I have a particular blanket that I use with it, everyone knows this is my chair. I'm sitting here. I've had to ritualize that. And I have to tell you, I have not sat in that chair yet today. In fact, no, I did. I sat in and had my breakfast, but remembering it, I was on the edge of the chair and I was eating very quickly, So after this, I will go and sit there. I'll have my favorite cup of tea and I have to sometimes make myself do it and just go, this is me. I am sitting in my chair. And sometimes I sit in that chair and the tears will start to flow for no particular reason. And I just allow it. And there's joy in that. Yesterday, I did some singing practice. I'm a student of Indian devotional chanting. And I sit there, and that for me is deeply restful to sit and just do my sargam practice, sitting in the chair with my favorite cup of Earl Grey. And sometimes it's just like, I know I shouldn't be having the sourdough toast with all the butter and all the marmalade, but I'm having that. And I know this isn't the most nutritionally amazing thing for my nervous system or whatever, but I'm having it. And I'll even put peanut butter on it as well as marmalade, as well as butter. So I think part of it is, as I have gotten older, I've become a little fierce about rest and pleasure and play and joy. And I don't like doing things that are very hard. And I do things that people think are hard, but I don't find them hard. I climb, and I go climbing. There are women in my lady social who are in their 20s, most of them. And I am not. I'm almost 3 times older than them. But I try and look for, how much rest can I have? I've become a better climber as I've got older, because I treat my climbing like dance. So between the holds, how can I rest rather than push, pull, push, 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 push? And I will make those big moves. And I am very, very strong. And I will deadlift more than my own weight, 60 kilos. I'll deadlift 60 kilos, which is 8 kilos more than I weigh. But I will then rest a lot after that. I will ritualize, okay, I'm going to do strong today, because Stacey Sims, we need our muscle as we get older. But I'm going to eat good food when I get home, and there will be 20 minutes. And that 20 minutes might be lying on the floor. It might be lying on my Shakti mat. I might have to listen to something to help me come down from it. But I have become very discerning about stealing moments of rest when I can and play. So I was at a strength class this morning, Reformer Pilates, and there was 7 of us there. And then suddenly I just said, why is everyone so quiet? Can we not laugh a bit while we're doing this? And they were like, because this is so hard. And I was like, yeah, but if we laugh, it won't be so hard. And then suddenly the whole vibe of the class changed.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all having a laugh while we were doing this. And we were like, yeah, strong women. We can celebrate this.
Yeah, well, I love the idea of bringing pleasure into our rest, because when I think about rest, it means like, okay, go into my bedroom, get into bed, turn off the lights.
Yeah.
And that whole act seems like so daunting sometimes in the middle of the day. Like, I love this idea of you making it a sensory experience, choosing, making it a ritual. You have your red, beautiful chair, and you allow yourself to enjoy food and a tea that you really, really love and gives you pleasure. I love this idea of making rest into a pleasurable sensory experience. I am definitely going to try that. I highly recommend everyone who's listening to, maybe shift that mindset of making rest something that we really move into a state of pleasure. I know I talk about pleasure all the time, but I never have really thought about it from a rest perspective, really allowing myself to just, decompress and rest and pleasure. I know that going on the opposite end of the spectrum, I've heard you speak about the idea of resting in discomfort than trying to avoid or push through it. Can you explain what this means, resting in discomfort, and how someone can begin to practice this when we're going through really difficult times?
And again, if I may, let me use my personal lived experience of how I do this. So I've been going through a time where, we call it sandwich years. We're sandwiched between 2 difficult things, bringing up a young adult mother. My daughter's 20. She's been going through her own challenges. It's not an easy time for these young people in today's world. And then I have an elderly mother who's 87, who has Alzheimer's, who lives thousands of miles away in South America. And the things that get me are guilt. These are my favorites: guilt, shame, worry, and fear. And those are my favorites, inverted commas. They will tell me, you're a bad person. You're not allowed to go back to sleep. How dare you think you can have pleasure? How can you have joy? How can you enjoy your life? Now, I can navigate those mostly during the day because I'm fully in my adult brain. But at night, they can really catch up on me because, at night, we can go into this childlike subconscious, unconscious state when we sleep. And then you suddenly wake up with a jolt, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and you're in this kind of vulnerable Chinese medicine heart time. Your heart is open and all your sorrow and discomfort bubbles up to the surface. Oh my God, my mother, what kind of daughter am I that my 87-year-old mother is bedridden and being looked after by other strangers? I am such a bad mother. How could I be such a bad mother to my daughter that she's going through all of this stuff? And these are the things that will typically come up for me. And so I have learned how to soothe those demons. And I have worked on them. I've sought out therapy when I've needed to. I'm not in therapy at the moment, but if I need to, if those voices are going full speed, I will seek out my therapy or my Reiki lady who will do some Reiki on me, whatever I need to do, because I do not choose to have my life governed by these raging thoughts, these punitive thoughts, which fundamentally, I know that I'm doing my best. And I know that my mother has her journey. I know that my daughter has her journey. And for me, because of my spiritual beliefs, prayer is a big part of this as well. I do believe that our souls have a journey. But I have learned very practical techniques as well. The havening technique. I am safe. I am safe in my body. It is safe to sleep. If the thoughts, and I think, did it happen? Yeah, for seconds in the early hours, I didn't look at the time. If you check the time during the night, you will come up into full consciousness. So don't check the time. This is such a practical thing for overriding that worry and being able to rest even while these thoughts are raging, to come back into the body. Don't check the time. If you need to go and pee, go and pee. If you need to pee twice, pee twice. If you need to go to the loo 3 times, go 3 times. As women, we get so hung up on, I'm waking up so many times, I'm going to the bathroom so many times now that my bladder is XYZ. Just ditch the stories. I've got teenage clients who are going to the bathroom 3 times during the night. Just don't get so hung up on it. Do it if you need to. Don't put a story on it. Come back, you haven't looked at the time, and then you might use the havening technique. I'm safe in my body.
So if I could just pause you there, because if you are listening, you are crossing your hands over your heart, right?
Over my heart, and I'm doing what's called bilateral stimulation. I have my hands and I'm rubbing them up and down my arms, or even tapping, just tapping on the surface. And what this is doing is that it's actually bringing me into my body. I can feel this. It's getting me out of my head and into my body. And I will often, with my clients, say things like, let's do this. I am safe. I'm safe in my body. I am safe to rest. I'm safe to rest. Notice I'm not using the word sleep. I'm using the word rest. It's easier to rest than it is to sleep. I'm safe to rest. I'm safe in my life. It is safe to let go. I'm safe in my body. I am safe. I am safe. I am safe. It's safe to let go. And I have longer versions of this on my Instagram. If people just look through the meditations, they'll find them. In fact, I might do another one of these and put that on there. And just invite yourself to come back into your body. And another very simple thing, I got my sleep program cohort to do this last week, is just to go right now, before we start the session, let's just come into our bodies. I love to put my hand on my belly. I love to rub my belly. My belly is bigger than it used to be. It was bigger than it was certainly in my 20s, 30s and 40s. I have a bigger belly now. And I love to rub this belly. And if I'm woken up with these thoughts, put my hand on my belly, just the weight of my hands on my belly, or one hand over the heart, one on the belly. Again, somatic, bringing myself back into my body. I'm safe to rest. It's safe to rest. I'm safe to rest. Now, for me, my advanced technique is to call on my spiritual practice. So I might invoke a mother, Devi energy. I might use a Gayatri mantra, which I've learned from, my background in Hinduism.
Mm-hmm.
Often I pray. But if you don't have those beliefs, I'm allowed to rest. I'm allowed to rest.
And that will stop
It
the mind chatter.
stops the mind chatter. And I also have a beautiful meditation that I teach my clients, which I could do a 30-second version of this now, if you like. Do you want me to do this?
Sure, I would love that.
Yeah. So it sounds a bit crazy, but it's a form of a yoga nidra. And I did this at Mind, Body, Spirit Festival over a week ago. And there we were in this crazy environment at the National Exhibition Centre in Birmingham in England. And there were literally thousands of people and the noise. And I just got on stage and I couldn't even think what to say to people. And I said, let's just do this technique to bring ourselves into our bodies. And my feet started tingling. People said that even with the noise, they could, and let's use the noise as a metaphor for all the crazy thoughts in the head. So here's the meditation. So imagine you're in bed and you can't get to sleep. You're exhausted, but you can't get to sleep. Or imagine you're in bed and you wake in the early hours and you can't sleep. So here's the exercise. So you repeat these words as I say them. You repeat them silently as if you're putting a baby to sleep. So this is what we do. I love my right foot. I love my right big toe. I love my right little toe. I love all the toes of my right foot. I love the top of my right foot. I love the bottom of my right foot. I love my right ankle. I love my right lower leg. Okay, so if you open your eyes. Now, this is the exercise. You just go up your body. And the chances are you won't get to the top of your head. You end up at the top of the head and you go all the way down. You end up on your right foot. You will start to fall asleep and you'll lose your train of thought. And it becomes a bit nonsensical if you're trying to do this. And as soon as you lose your train of thought, you go back to the starting point and you start again. I love my right foot. I always start on my right foot because I've got a bit of an injury on my right foot and I'm kind of healing it. And it's getting better and better.
And what is this doing at a nervous system level for us?
Oh, I was gifted by a client a few years ago an aura ring, and I'm not on commission to them. It was a project we were working on. And if I were to check my aura ring now, it probably would say my nervous system has dropped into restoration mode, into parasympathetic. Heart coherence, heart rate variability. So suddenly your nervous system is starting to pendulate beautifully into parasympathetic. I've got so used to doing this for my nervous system that I can feel when I'm doing it where I am in my nervous system. My body starts to tingle and my pelvic area starts to tingle and my heart area starts to open. And I just start to I feel this surge of joy right now. I feel like I cry. I'm not sad, but there's an uprising of emotion that tells me that my nervous system is I'm in pleasure right now. Just by doing a few seconds of that exercise with you, and by doing the work that I love doing, I'm in pleasure. I'm in joy.
I noticed when you were guiding me through that, there was a certain kind of tenderness that arose in my body, this sweetness, as though I was tending to myself like a small child. And maybe that, oftentimes that's what we need to do, is tend to ourselves, tend to our inner child, tend to our younger parts of ourselves that perhaps didn't get tended to. It's such a beautiful practice. Thank you so, so much for sharing that. It reminds me of something that I've heard you say, that sleep isn't just about closing your eyes and hoping for the best. Like, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about sleep that people need to unlearn?
One is that I need to go to bed and be asleep within seconds and not wake up until the morning. Well, actually, there's some scientific misconceptions in there. On average, we should be taking around 10 to 15 minutes to fall asleep. If you're falling asleep within seconds, it's because you're exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, should I wake up during the night? Yes. The average human being wakes up 10 to 15 times a night. It's normal. We would be extinct if we didn't. Stop worrying about it and stop obsessing over the data that your wearable is saying you woke so many times a night. If you're obsessive, if you're a perfectionistic overthinker, ditch your wearable for a few weeks and just listen to your body and stop measuring and listen to how you feel when you wake up in the morning. How do you feel? Ditch the notion of 8 hours of sleep. I sometimes fight with other sleep experts. I get interviewed by a lot of journalists. Do we need 8 hours of sleep? Kind of, yeah, it's a good one to aim for, but there are people who could get by on a lot less. And there are people who need more. And if I had to generalize, I'd say the more restful your life is, the less sleep you'll need. But then don't beat yourself up about that. I go through periods where I need lots of rest. And then I go through periods where I can get by on less. And I know that I can, for example, Mind, Body, Spirit show. The night I went up there with one of my best friends to the NEC. I was presenting on Sunday, and my friend and I got there on Saturday. And she goes, "Oh, there's this brilliant program called Rivals on Disney Plus. And, there's all this kind of sex and bonking and what have you in this program. It's based on Jilly Cooper's novel, Rivals. You must watch it." So she gave me the password for her Disney Plus. And I broke my sleep rules, which is get into bed, get your laptop and phone. I was staying in this hotel room, but I had my laptop to present from the next day. And I watched an episode and I didn't have my speakers with me. So I was right up against my laptop with all that blue light coming at me. And I turned the brightness down, but I was blue light. And I was trying to listen. And I got to one episode. I thought, I cannot stop now. I have to watch the next one. And I have to watch the next. I watched 3 episodes and I got to bed really late. I had the worst sleep ever. But I know that I am so resilient. I know that most of the time I don't break the rules. I know that I'm passionate about my subject. And maybe that is why I got the cold up, because I did bend some of the rules and I'd worked really hard in the week before that. And so, it was a little bit naughty. But we can get by sometimes bending the rules and don't get so hung up on it. When I'm working with professional athletes like Chelsea football, I used to work with some of their footballers, and they've got a big game the next day and they'd be worrying about their sleep, understandably. And I'd say, just ditch the notion of sleep the night before. Just think about resting. You're getting married tomorrow. Just think about getting good rest the night before. Giving the presentation of your life the next day. You're getting up early for a flight because you're going on holiday. Great, you'll rest when you're on holiday or on the flight. Just don't worry about it. And I think we need to worry about our sleep. We need to treat it as if it's the most important divine gift, but you also need to not worry about it. It's funny because it's a kind of contradiction.
Yeah, I can tend to stress over my sleep and then be so hard on myself the day after. Why didn't you do this? You should have done that. And so I wind myself up when perhaps it could be resting instead. Okay, so I didn't get such a great night's sleep. Okay, instead of winding myself up with why didn't you do this or that or this, Gabriella, I could just pause and rest in pleasure, rest in sensory awareness, ditching the stress over not sleeping. I think is a very, very important one. I think we can stress so much over it. But do you think that it is foundational? Sleep is foundational to how we think, feel, and connect with others?
So it really is. So that's why I say treat it like it's the most important divine thing, but also treat it sometimes like a pinch of salt. It is really, really important. And what you want to be doing is most of the time honoring your sleep and honoring the rituals and practices that will enable to give you the sleep that you deserve. There's a reason why we're designed to spend a third of our lives sleeping. There's nature is intelligent. So it is really important when we sleep well. In Hindi, there's a word called sattvic, which means pure. Sometimes people talk about clean sleep, but I like to call it sattvic sleep. Sattvic meaning pure, the right amount of REM, the right amount of deep, the kind of sleep where you wake up and you smile. And, I do sleep with my dog in my bedroom, probably shouldn't. I have a rescue dog who sleeps in a basket beside me. And, you know, when I wake up in the morning, I know if I've had good sleep because I want to sing to her, and then she'll start singing as well. She starts, you know, she's got Jack Russell, so she's a real drama queen. But I know when I've had that sat fixed sleep as I wake up feeling, you know, I don't need to look at my data to know that my readiness score is through the roof. My sleep was amazing, which is how it was last night. And I did wake up worrying at one point, you know, and I have run out of my HRT, which I won't be getting until tomorrow. But and I went to bed thinking, you know, what's going to happen? And actually, it was fine because I just worked with my physiology and gave it that kind of softness that it needed. And, you know, I see a lot of people, I would say relationships can really struggle. You know, partners sleeping with a partner in your bed. If you're a sensitive sleeper and you come into a new relationship, that can be a game changer because if you have different relationships with sleep. So in my sleep classifications, I describe people's relationship with sleep on a spectrum. And at one end, you have the martini sleeper who can sleep anytime, any place, anywhere. They don't know why I have a job, really. What's all this business about sleep? You just sleep. And then on the other end of the scale, you have the sensitive sleeper who wakes at the slightest noise, is likely to be a perfectionistic overthinker. They'll be working on one of your magic circle law firms or the top 6, you know, management consultancies. There may have been childhood trauma, which has resulted in a more sensitive nervous system, or they may be going through life events. They're just sensitive. They travel with their own pillows, their own blankets. They need things to be just so. They need more rituals, okay? In relationships, I was just explaining to someone this morning why his girlfriend was a certain way and needed certain things, his new girlfriend, in order for her to be able to sleep. Because he was like, she needs blinds and she needs this and she needs a fan and she needs all of this stuff and all of this stuff and all that. And I said, okay, let me explain. Because relationships, I've seen them coming unstuck because people end up having to sleep in separate rooms. They end up having arguments. Typically, the martini sleeper will be snoring. The sensitive sleeper can't sleep on an argument. Their nervous system is dysregulated. I need to regulate my nervous system before I can sleep. Your martini sleeper, it's going, I just need to go to bed and sleep and I'll feel better. Because they have such a love affair. They're so good at sleeping that they can just go to bed and the nervous system automatically clunk, clunk, clunk. Argument sorted while they're sleeping. They wake up, they feel great. So it's so fundamental to relationships to recognize. And, you know, I'm on a mission to try and educate the world about some of this stuff because people don't realize how fundamental it is to their relationship. I think my second marriage ended because we just couldn't. My ex-husband just could not understand my inability to cope with the fact that he snored so much.
What do you recommend to couples who have these different sleep patterns? How can we move to a place of more harmony, more pleasure if we have such different sleep patterns?
Communication is really important. You know, become familiar with what I've just said. Rewind the podcast, listen to that again, play it for your partner, and then lovingly communicate outside of the bedroom. This is how I am. This is who I am. Please understand. Now, if you can look at the practicalities, it might be that you put a fan in the bedroom. If they snore, you might lovingly communicate that you have the biggest bed possible in the sleep space so that you can put distance between you. It might be that you negotiate with them. Honey, I think the snoring might be caused by, you know, you are a little bit overweight. Should we go to the gym together? Or it could be the hydration, needing to drink more water, or they're dehydrated from alcohol or caffeine. Those are touchy subjects, but you start with that conversation about honoring differences. This gets into the whole subject of relationships. People go into relationships thinking, God, we're so similar. You fall in love with yourself, basically. When you meet someone, they're like, we're so similar, you know? But actually, you want to honor the differences. grow to love those differences and then lovingly negotiate. Go study nonviolent communication or something. If you want to lovingly communicate to your partner, my darling, my dearest, I'm giving a presentation tomorrow morning. Lovingly, can we negotiate that you sleep in the spare room tonight because I need to get good sleep tonight. I need to rest well tonight, and you're the one who's a good sleeper. So do you mind taking the spare room or the sofa? It might be that you lovingly negotiate separate caves sometimes, and you lovingly negotiate intimacy. I remember years ago watching the film. It was a Chinese film called Raise the Red Lantern. And I don't know if you've ever heard of that film, but it was this emperor who had so many wives, and he would choose the wife he would sleep with by putting a red lantern outside her bedroom. It was like, then she knew that night she would be chosen. But, we almost need to find our equivalent, our modern day equivalent of, darling, tonight we're not sleeping together. If, the logistics allow. But it's communication, Gabriella, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I found that is absolutely key. In my household, my husband travels. Sometimes he has to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go catch a plane. I know that that's going to interrupt my sleep. And I used to get really upset. You're waking me up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And so, yeah, we had to communicate lovingly, and he would let me know in advance when he's getting up. And I would say, okay, well, I absolutely need to sleep. So I'm going to go sleep in a different bedroom so that you can get up, make all the noise that you want. Or sometimes, my own waking up, I've had to learn, if I have middle of the night wakings, to just be very respectful of his deep sleep, right? And so to get up very quietly, try not to turn on the lights. And so we have dimmers, or I try to tiptoe, and I just, because you can get woken up in the middle of the night and you're trying to reach for the lights or for a glass of water, and you're making all kinds of noise. So yeah, we've moved into that kind of space of really trying to respect each other's sleep patterns and sleep and be as respectful as possible, and then talk about it the next day.
Absolutely. Yes.
I noticed you had a really rough night of sleep, and, tell me about. Sometimes just talking about why I woke up in the middle of the night and what I was thinking about helps. The thoughts that were going through my mind help, as well as, for my partner. I'd love to talk about dreams, because I've heard you describe dreams from soul to communicate. How can we learn? I get woken up by dreams all the time. How can we learn to interpret our dreams and use them as a tool for personal growth?
So let's talk about dreams, but I wondered if I could just quickly address one point in what you've said, just very quickly, which is the 5 a.m. waking, because I've heard you mention it twice now. The sleep that you get at around 5 a.m. and onwards is of limited value. Just know that. So the next time you're woken at that time, just say to yourself, wow, okay, I've had all my absolutely need to have sleep, and now I can just use this as lovely time to rest, lovely time just to rest. And there's a yoga, those yoga eye pillows that you get in yoga classes? I know that often I will wake around 5. I just know it from the sounds and things like that in the environment. I haven't looked at my clock, but what I'll do is I'll then get the yoga eye pillow and put it on my eye, and it weights the eyes. I don't put an eye mask on, but I put the eye pillow on. It weights the eyes. It stops the REM sleep and the thinking process, and it helps me drop back down into a state of rest. So the next time you're woken at 5, perhaps you and your listeners can just remember that I say, don't worry about it. It's of limit. It's nice to have. Now you're in the pleasure zone of rest, and just, I can lie here. My poor husband has to go to work. I get to snuggle in and just rest. Okay, so that's just one thing.
I'm going to take out my yoga eye pillow and keep it next to my bed. I definitely use it to go into those lovely restful periods after a yoga class. But 5 a.m. wakings, I've given up on trying to go back to sleep. I think right now what I struggle with is trying to stop the mind chatter. So
you use that. I love my right foot, you use that exercise, and you get out of this misconception that you have that you're not sleeping. The chances are when we go from fully alert, like we both are right now, beta waves, Then as you fall asleep, you start your first stage. If I start to close my eyes like that and we go into that tenderness and that sweetness, then you're going into an alpha state. You're starting to touch that. If we go deeper and the thoughts get a bit nonsensical and wobbly and dreamy, we'll talk about dreams, then you're going into theta and you go deeper and deeper and deeper. You're going into delta. But people think they're awake when they're actually in theta alpha. And you might be thinking you're not sleeping. And you have a powerful mind. So your mind is going to do everything to convince you you're not sleeping. You're more asleep than you think you are. So if you use the I love my right foot, I use the somatic exercise, hand on your belly, you'll be more rested than you think you are. I've seen this in sleep clinics where people think they're not sleeping. He goes, do you see what I mean? Waking at 5, not back to you. Nope, you slept. You got the data, you slept. Dreams.
Yes, because sometimes I wake up from dreams and I'm sitting there interpreting my dreams and I don't go back. Tell us about dreams. I know you have some wonderful wisdom behind why we dream and how we can use them to our advantage.
Yeah. So we dream for all sorts of reasons. Some of our dreams are just kind of junky, packing away the detail of the previous day. To-do lists. That's why it's important to write your to-do list before you go to bed, not first thing in the morning, but before. So, take that into your dream state. We dream to sort out our emotions. If you're worrying about something, you're getting into a new relationship, you start dreaming about catastrophes and things like that. Maybe you're worrying that past traumatic relationship stuff is going to come up again. We dream to heal our emotions as well. So when you're dreaming, it's as if you've invited the best therapist and counselor into your sleep and they are healing you while you're sleeping. And I saw this time and time again when I worked at the psychiatric clinic, where people, when I could get them sleeping well, it would kind of repair a lot of the trauma that happened while they were sleeping. And then we dream creatively as well. Stephen King famously, I think, traveling on American Airlines, he fell asleep on the plane, woke up with a jolt because he had dreamt that he'd been captured by a crazy fan who dragged him through the forest into this house and tied him to a bed, tied his feet and broke his ankles so he couldn't walk. Of course, that was the storyline for Misery. But what he did was when he woke up is he wrote it down straight away. So one of the things I recommend is if you have powerful dreams is that you write them down first thing in the morning without telling anyone about them. Don't talk about them. Don't tell anyone about them. Just write them down, stream of consciousness, and preferably not on a phone, on paper. There is a very unique relationship between pen and paper, very different from electronic devices. Write it down. And before you've tried to interpret or tell anyone about it, you've got it there on paper. Don't even try and interpret it necessarily. But once you start writing it down, you start to get better at interpretation. Starts to make more sense. And then you'll get a sense for what your dreams are trying to tell you. And some dreams can be premonitions. A week before my sister died, I dreamt that she was climbing a mountain and the mountain was just gravel and she kept sliding down. And I kind of knew that's where she was going, So dreams can be predicted. It can be. That doesn't always mean that though. And, if you have the same dream over and over again, I used to have this dream over and over again that I was walking into a lecture theatre, about to lecture to thousands of people. A bit like a formal lecture theatre, like when I was at uni, with all these rows and rows and rows of very formal lecture theatre. And I'd look down and I was naked.
Wow.
And then people would start throwing, balled up bits of paper and their pens and things at me. And when I sat with that, I realized it was imposter syndrome. It was they didn't think I was good enough. No, I don't think I'm good enough. It's a fear of being found out. So I had to work with that. And if that comes up again before a big presentation, I don't think I've had that for a long, long time, but it might still bubble up. I might get a gig where I'm like, oh, I'm presenting alongside Marianne Williamson and, Deepak Chopra or something. And it might come up again because I don't feel good enough. And then I'll have to work on that.
So do you recommend journaling about those dreams or what's coming up for you, or working with a therapist or like yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't do a lot of dream interpretation for people. I try
Mhm.
and encourage them to go into their dreams through journaling or therapy. I'm not a therapist. I don't do counseling and things like that. But I just think journaling is such a
Yeah.
gift that you can give to yourself and on paper. I always have a journal on the go. There's another amazing form of journaling that would be really good for your listeners. And I call this vomit journaling. Before you get into bed, everything that comes up that's bothering you, you might go through a phase where every night you're writing the same thing. I'm a bad mother. I'm a bad daughter. I'm a bad mother. I'm a bad daughter. I'm an imposter. And you write it. You just get it out and give yourself 10 minutes. Don't correct it. It doesn't need to be beautiful. Vomit, vomit, vomit. And then you don't take it into your sleep.
Mm.
And your dreams won't be so punitive,
Or you probably won't be woken up by those very things. Finally, I'd love to ask you, what if someone feels stuck? If we're stuck in a cycle of burnout and poor sleep, what is the first step they can take today to begin restoring their energy and joy?
Today, plan how you're going to do those 5 non-negotiables. What are you going to eat for breakfast tomorrow morning? What are you going to eat that's nutrient rich? Get your protein, your fat, your carb. Plan your breakfast. Start becoming more aware of your breathing, I would say, as well. Get yourself some really good magnesium glycinate. Go to your local health food shop and buy a really good, the most easily absorbed form of magnesium glycinate or bisglycinate. I take magnesium glycinate every evening. And that really works for me. And have hope. Be hopeful. Practice those 5 non-negotiables for 10 to 14 days and lose your grip on your sleep. Don't be saying, always been an insomniac. I'll never be able to sleep. My mother was an insomniac. My grandmother was an insomniac. Look at those inflexibilities. Where you're saying to yourself, I know I never get to sleep after 5 a.m. when he's gone to work. I never do. Check them. Let go. Surrender. Open yourself up to the possibility that you do actually sleep, but you're just not a sleep laboratory. So you don't know what's going on with your sleep. You think you're thinking, but actually you're resting more than you think you are, So have hope, hold hope, and listen to this podcast over and over and over again, and then stalk me, but don't really stalk me, but
Well, how can we stalk you? Share with them how we can find you and work with you.
all the usual places, social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, at Dr. Nerina, at Dr. Nerina, which I'm sure you'll have in your show notes.
Yes, I'll put in the show notes. You have some wonderful blog pieces that you've written, so I highly recommend going to your.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the website is www.drnerina.com. There's lots of free stuff. There's courses, there's very inexpensive little courses and programs, or just Google me, Dr. Nerina and Sleep, and there's lots of free stuff as well.
And you also give talks to organizations, to companies. So I know if anyone wants to invite you to come and speak, I know that you're an incredible speaker and adds so much value to an organization.
Yeah, I do lots of speaking, but I try and bring joy to everything I do, even if it's in heartbreaking environments. I really believe that we're here as human beings to find joy, actually, to allow ourselves joy and pleasure. And I do believe that sleep is just one of those ways. And just love your rest. Treat your bedroom like a sanctuary. I mean, I actually bless my bed. I changed the sheets and everything yesterday, and I sprinkle lavender and eucalyptus over it. Then I sage it, and it takes me 3 minutes to do that. And I just think this is the place where I get to rest, so that I get to go out into the world and be the woman that I want to be, and the mother, and the girlfriend, and the whatever, and the professional. It's because I sleep. It's because my sleep is a gift. And rest is a gift, and it's a pleasure, and it's a joy. So honor it.
I love that. Resting in pleasure. Definitely going to be mantra moving forward. Thank you so, so much, Dr. Nerina. It really has been a pleasure to have you here and to listen to you speak your wisdom and your expertise and your personal lived experience. Thank you so much for sharing so much of yourself.
Thank you so much, Gabriella. It's been, I have to say, I really mean this, hand on heart, it's been one of the loveliest conversations. I did quite a few interviews and I've really, really loved our conversation. And thank you for the amazing work you're doing. It's so important.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Pleasure in the Pause. Want to help me spread more pleasure in the world? Hit the share episode button and send it to a friend or post it on your Instagram stories and tag me, Gabriella Espinosa. And if you really love this podcast, please leave a rating or review, as this helps the show get in front of new listeners. Finally, if you would like to access even more pleasure and stay in touch, sign up for my free pleasure upgrade bundle of powerful mind-body practices by going to pleasureinthepause.com. Remember, your pleasure matters.